Welcome to Journey of an Aesthete podcast. We are honored to have a guest who is a poet, writer, author. I'm going to have you say your name first.
Sure. My name is Miguel Eichelberger.
Okay, once more.
My name is Miguel Eichelberger.
Miguel Eichelberger. How is that? Miguel Eichelberger.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Oh, okay. Well, the major reason why, Miguel, you are on our show is because of one considerable achievement in poetry. One volume of poetry you title Everything Is. Mm-hmm. Everything Is. And before this episode is over, I hope to hear you read from at least one poem, or maybe if you are so inclined to do so, because I have a feeling that you'd be a good reader of your own work. This volume is about many things. There's a lot in it, but chiefly it's like much art itself. One of the biggest topics of art, of course, is grief and loss. And that's one of the founding themes of this volume. But you have much more to you than this poetry, because I understand you've written science fiction. Is this true? You have a science fiction novel and
I have a science fiction short story and a science fiction screenplay.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an odd thing, but I find that I'm one of those rare people who believes, and I would encourage every writer to do this: write in every genre. Write in every genre. Test yourself in every genre, especially if it's a genre that pulls you in, because I think writing in one makes you better at the other, makes you better at the other, makes you better at the other. So.
Well, that's a very bold and perhaps maybe wise assertion. But before we get into that, let's. I always like to do a linear chronology of our guests. So start from an earlier time. When it like yourself, when you were a young or fledgling writer or author. Do you mind talking biographically about what took you to Everything Is and took you to this current release, and a little bit about what you want to discuss of your journey in the arts in general and prose in particular and poetry in particular? So what?
Yeah. So writing for me was a must from the very beginning. I remember at 13, I decided that whatever I was going to do would have to have writing included in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
Have to have some form of creativity included. Okay. And what that resulted in was me writing fiction. Fiction was the first thing that called to me. And then I was writing for a long time, in the way that kids do, dabbling over the course of my teens. And then when I was 19, 20, I had that arrogant thing where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to write a novel and I'm going to get famous. It's going to be amazing. And so I sat down and I wrote a book, not a very good one. And I got a little bit of it was a brush almost with publishing, right? Where, I was speaking with an agent and things were happening. And then the editorial process was such that I didn't handle it very well. I didn't handle it very maturely. And I ran from fiction after that. It was such a, it really connected. It hit my ego in a bad way. So I ran from fiction, and I'll be honest, I hid in poetry. Now, poetry had already...
Interesting.
It had grabbed me a little bit. I remember when I was a kid, again, I remember encountering Leonard Cohen when I was 14 and understanding immediately that man was more poet than musician, and loving the simplicity of his lyrics, something that claws for the marrow in 4 syllables. I mean, come on, that's you can't beat that. And I remember being like, oh, you can do this with poetry, rather than what I had thought poetry was. But I kind of just left it on the side and then moved into the fiction space. But yeah, when I was done with that, then I was like, okay, I'm going to go, quite frankly, find refuge in poetry, because poetry is so open to interpretation. It's so subjective that you can't, it's hard to injure an ego in that. Right. But then I started to understand what poetry was for. And that was all through university and all of that. And that's what brought me into the space where when you when you come to the hard moments in life, when you come to the
Yeah.
whether it's grief or love or whatever, like there's even spirituality, there's a reason you've never read any Bible written in prose. They're all written in poetry. Every spiritual text, it's written in esoteric poetic language, because you're trying to grab something you can't really put into words. You feel it, you don't really put it into words, right? So yeah, that's what brought me here.
If I may hold that thought, because I want to interject something about which I feel pretty strongly. So I use the word poetry similarly to the way arts scholars or art critics would use it. So I was very fortunate. For close to 40 years, I lived in Boston, Massachusetts. So wouldn't you know it, I got to study in the summer once with Helen Bendler.
Amazing.
Of all people. So I know my Robert Frost and T.S. Eliot and and company, and so I know a little poetry. I once had a friend who actually memorized The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser, committed that to memory. So I know some very, very highbrow, rarefied people. But let's put all that aside. That's a long-winded way of saying that I define poetry in this general sense of kind of synonymous with, I'm going to say, make-believe representation itself.
Yeah.
By which I mean a Spielberg movie is poetry, a Bresson film is poetry, a sitcom TV is poetry. Could be bad poetry, but poetry. I'm using, it's not just poetry proper. So in that sense, fictional prose is sort of alongside poetry in that it's not literal. It's not fact. It's not literal reality. You said that's a source of you said spirituality and therapy. I mean, those are big. Whether it's Wordsworth or Coleridge or whomever, it's indispensable. But I've talked too long. I just wanted to get that out of the way because it's more in large definitions, in large.
And here's why I would agree with you to I think a pretty big extent is after doing so much poetry for so long. And then going back into the fictional space, understanding that what I think makes fiction great is the poetry of it, right? Like, I mean, yes, it's got its rules and its structures and all that, but when you can apply a poetic aesthetic or even just a poetic build of the story itself, right? Like I would submit that it makes it better. So like that's the thing. It makes it more, gives you more opportunity for an audience to connect to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one virtue of thinking of it that way. I mean, I do think that all artists, whatever their, I guess their background, if you want to call it that, or their training or their immediate feeling or consciousness, is kind of going to be with us on these you and I on these things, just because it just makes sense,
Yeah.
And of course, there's been this longer. One of the longer challenges in our lives now is the challenge of living in an age that is digitized, right? And an age that is, I should say, is obsessed with fact and lie, or obsessed with fact and untruth, or obsessed with the distinction between what I call make-believe and news report. If we're going to put those very crude, we're going to have news report on one side, make believe on the other, and we're sort of, for maybe sometimes for understandable reasons, obsessed with, well, where's the line? What's true, what's not? This is one of the obsessions of our age. I'm 57, so I've seen different ages. I've seen, for example, I could safely say that 30 years ago, this was not as much of an obsession. 30 years ago, for whatever reason, there were other obsessions, but people weren't. But today, it's always, is it true or not? But of course, in your volume, everything is, you're dealing with the material of your own life. So there's truth in that, of course. But I've spoken too long. So go. I just wanted to jump in with that.
Well, what I like about what you're saying when it comes to truth on that front is, I do believe that there are fundamental truths, right? And what I found through the poetry process, which was a surprise to me, is it became a almost like an archaeology of that kind of truth, right? Like you have no choice. You kind of have to cut through your own nonsense and your own all of the stuff all the beliefs you've kind of accrued by accident over the course of your years, whether you got it from like teachers or parents or society, whatever it is, to get to something real, to get to something true. And then of course, it's filtered through you as a human being when you make your work. But yeah, it like for this work in particular, the only decision I made, the only active decision I made was when Dad passed away. He was somebody who always, like, consummate scientist, right? He was somebody who, no matter what it was, no matter how bad it was or scary it was, approach it with a sense of profound curiosity instead, right? And so when he died, I was like, okay, maybe I can follow that lead. Anytime I feel anything, anytime I think anything, anytime it hurts this bad or there's a moment of joy, whatever it is, like, okay, let's explore that with the sense of curiosity and just see what happens. And and that's what the whole process ended up being. Like, okay, so grief comes with profound injury, comes with profound insight, and sometimes numbness, like sometimes nothing at all. It's just like a placid lake, and that's it. And but yeah, like, to get into that and to write about that and to write through it, it was a fascinating experience to start discovering things that you did not expect to discover, right? And not just within a relationship with a parent or anything like that. It's discovering a fundamental truth in the self. And yeah, so that's why basically, and that's the punchline of the whole thing is everything is okay. That's why it's called Everything Is. Like, everything is okay. The entire human catastrophe, everything is okay. So yeah,
that's a fundamental truth. But it might not go down so easily for many people, because we want to, being humans, we want to control things for the best outcome, right? Or what we perceive as the best outcome, and that's also a natural impulse. And that, of course, that impulse we think runs counter to what you've just said about everything is okay. I mean, our background. So we both lost our fathers, as I said. So I lost my father close to not 15 years, but 14 years ago. So that's some time. This, of course, is raw and recent, right? 2017, am I right about that?
2017, yeah.
That's very, very raw and recent. But sometimes, even though it seems, for me, 14 years ago, it seems like it could have been 5 years ago sometimes, or 6 years ago. So yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing.
On that, like, what came to your rescue?
Rescue?
Yeah, when you lost your father, what came to your rescue, your emotional rescue, as you went through all of it and felt all of it? What still comes to your rescue?
Well, when my dad died, that's when I came up with a musical idea. So I invented my own style of music that I called hard listening music.
I like
play on easy listening. And so it would not be wrong to say that the loss of him inspired me to actually, that's a big undertaking to create a solo piano style. And I've been working in that ever since. I mean, I do it now. I mean, I'm doing a hard listening thing. So that there's that. So I reached to sort of abstract instrumental music to help. But rescue, I don't know that word. These are difficult words, right? So I don't know. I'm in a different place with it now than I was then. I'm never one to give advice. I would never, I never want to do that. We all have our own journey with death. Death of loved ones, family members, girlfriends, boyfriends, spouses, just friends. All those categories that I just mentioned could have death in them. You could lose it. You can lose all kinds of people.
Yeah.
That's, but it's really, so there's that similarity that I developed this kind of solo piano music. Was I doing that anyhow? Yeah, but not as rigorously, not as conscientiously.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. So that's all I had to say about that. I didn't want to go on, but that is interesting, right? That when you had this volume of poetry, but you said that you looked at writing itself differently,
Yeah, so I've always had this like sort of love-hate relationship with poetry in many ways, where there are some undeniable works that invite you into it and invite you to to feel. And then there are other works that you'll encounter and it feels like esoteric. It feels like it's like the language is actively putting distance between you and either, you know, what the lived experiences of that person or what they were hoping for you to experience.
Yeah.
And so basically the thing came together for me in this because it became a sort of applied poetry. Like this is poetry that is literally helping me do a thing. It is helping me explore a thing and to get through a thing. And so because of that, like that changed everything for me, to think of it as more than just a comfort, like more than just having the value of comfort or being blown away by a phrase. There's this value of like, oh, this is actively doing something for me. This is actively helping me see my way through something. And so that's what it really changed for me. And then what ended up happening. So this is this original.
What you're reminding me of this Jeanette Winterson quote. Now, Jeanette Winterson is known as a queer activist, so she's on the political left. But you know, she was responding to people talking about cutting the arts in schools and arts funding, and how, you know, the arts, what you and I do, music, prose, is seen as ornamental or unnecessary.
Yeah.
He flips that around and says art is the most indispensable, necessary thing.
Yes.
And I think the phrase Jeanette Winterson used was, "You need a tough language." And poetry is a tough language. Of course, she wrote "Oranges Is Not the Only Fruit," and we can follow up on Jeanette Winterson's another topic. But yeah, it really very much connects to what you're talking about there. I think.
Yeah, and I would high five high five right now, because that's completely true. The funny thing about this is because also just from an artistic standpoint, the process itself. This is now a book that's 42 pages, something like that.
Yeah.
It began as over 140 raw poems. Because that's the other thing I would do too, is it would just be like first draft, go on to the next one, go on to the next one, go on to the next one. Okay. And then I sat down with my spouse, my wife, and we she's my editor. She's the only reason anything is any good. And sat down with her, and she like first helped me whittle it down to, I think it was 80, which is more of a manageable collection for sure. And then over the course of the last years, like I would edit it, and I would submit it, and I would put it out for prizes. I would do all these things. Yeah. And it always got like close, but it never went over the line. It never went over the line of being published. I got longlisted and shortlisted and that sort of thing. And then it was talk about changing the way I view writing. There was a friend of mine who we were talking about something almost unrelated, and he said, instead of trying to show them, why don't you let them see? And that was the thing that literally unlocked the book. We're talking like I went from who knows how many submissions, who knows how many rejections, and who knows how many iterations of the book, like getting work from or getting a review from like multiple incredible poets that exist in the world right now, providing editorial input. Yeah. And then I sat down, and 80 all of a sudden became this 40-page thing. And then I submitted it. We're talking like a week later, and it was immediately picked up. And what I did was got rid of all the stuff where I'm trying to show people what a remarkable human being my father was, where I'm trying to show them how remarkable my relationship I felt with him. Right. And instead just going to be like, no, just let them see. And that was it. And that totally changed the way I approach writing in all things. Like all of any effort I have, any egotistical effort I have to try and make people see a thing or understand a thing or hear a thing, I'm like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just going to let them see. And that's it. And that was the big shift for me.
That's yeah. I mean, of course, showing not telling is a cliche, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Bromide. It's interesting. I sort of, I guess somebody could give you, in your case, your wife or whoever, might not matter as much who it is. Although if it's your wife, I'm sure it's more significant than other advice, of course. But I'm just thinking that somebody might say something or tell you something that opens up, illuminates, and opens a door, or illuminates a path that you didn't have. And so that can happen. That can and does happen. Yeah. You said something before we started this recording that I want to return to, just because I don't want it to get away from this, about writing in genre, about flexibility of genre. Now, of course, many people, they write one thing and poets do one thing, but you purposefully, am I right? You purposely want to do different styles or genres? Talk more about that. I have curiosity about it.
Yeah. So, as I said, like my first love was fiction, and it kind of happened organically. It was like when I first, started writing fiction and stuff, I had a lot of fun in that space. Then when I went to go hide in poetry, had a lot of fun in that space. At the same time, I was in university for English, drama, and archaeology. And what I started to see in drama, what I was being taught in drama, I was like, oh, this is a home for poetry. This is where poetry began, right? Like the people would
It did.
And that was the first time I had a hint that like, oh, poetry is useful, right? Like it's more useful than anything else. Like you can do this on stage. And so then I was like, well, I want to write a play. And so I wrote a couple of plays, and then I'm like, well, I love movies, and that's not so far from writing a movie. So like, what happens if I step into that space? And I wrote a movie, and then and went back to.
May I ask what movie did you write?
It doesn't exist yet. It was optioned in Ireland. It was optioned in Ireland last year, which was cool, but it didn't go anywhere, as is what usually happens in the industry. But it's still sitting on the shelf, ready to go somewhere eventually. I'll probably be sending it back out to producers here in Canada at some point. So I wrote that, and then then back into the fiction thing. And every single time, what I started to learn is the voice becomes easier to find. The more, like, if you have a skill set in poetry, and if you have a skill set in screenwriting and spare prose or florid prose, then you have all these different tools you can reach for to not just say what it's about, but what it's really about, or not just like to really get to the heart of the matter. And that's why I would recommend to everybody, like, writing is right. I mean, I work in the marketing communication space as well, right? Like, all of that serves everywhere, and it just makes it easier to say what you really want to say, and make a character say what you really want to say, and all of that. And it gives you more in your arsenal,
So you're in Canada now, and that I'm sure that regional matters play a role, of course, right? In all. Do you identify yourself as in part Canadian, or you said there's also Portugal, right, and Switzerland? Or you want to talk about?
I'm the son of immigrant parents. So my mother was born and raised in Portugal. My father born and raised in Switzerland. They met in South Africa, moved to Canada, and had a family there, right? So I'm a Canadian citizen and a Swiss citizen, is what it is. But I'm Canadian through and through. So we're at. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's of course, so much there. I was wondering if I wanted to ask you to read one of your poems, or two. How about, is two be too many, or two?
I'm happy to. Yes.
So why don't we say I choose one and you choose one?
Sure. You go first.
Well, I'm going to give you a choice. You now read either Loss or Carrying Dad's Ashes. Which of those do you feel like reading?
Ooh, you know what? I'm going to read both of those. I'll read Loss first. Carrying Dad's Ashes would have been one of my choices.
Okay.
All right. So Loss is it's the second poem in the collection. And just briefly, I wanted to say too that I love rhyming poetry, courtesy of Leonard Cohen, and I think it needs to have a comeback.
Yeah.
Okay. Loss is a wound that bleeds out and keeps bleeding. It won't matter the strength of your hands. The pressure is supposed to be keeping the blood where it matters disbands. And there's grief in his ugly tuxedo, all rumpled and never in style. And when the fucker comes in for the evening, he hints that he might stay a while. So that's Loss.
That's Loss, the tuxedo.
Yeah.
That's a good poem to memorize.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Okay. Carrying Dad's Ashes back to Switzerland. The security scale tells the account. Pounds, kilograms, inches, meters, those measures that used to matter mean nothing to a collection of cinders. It's all burned in the end to ash. Residue that the wind could take makes the lifeless TSA employee ask questions. and requires paperwork, more paperwork than a blood-moving person just to return to a homeland's dust. They're what's left of my father, I say. And I wonder what special freight you were tasked to carry into the dark places of this world, security guard, before ever you breathed outside your mother. These are my dad, echoes of cosmic spark, the remainders of fire. Now you know.
I like that. Now you know.
Yeah.
I love hearing you read your poetry.
Well, thank you.
It makes me want to have you read another one that you just something you would move just the third. Let's just try. So what is?
Okay. I think
the urge. How about the urge to do something? That reflects back to what we talked about at the outset when I said we humans want to, control the outcome for the outcome.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
All right. On the urge to do something. There are mice in the traps, and why should I clean, tamp the rugs, scrub down the bathroom, run around in a little make-believe like this place always looks like that? Shine and magazine cover? No. I'll take this clastic chaos as it is. Dusty, windows and smudged light switches, rodent company. Let it be a moment like any other with a little mud on the floors. I get the idea, the psychology of it, but reality isn't clean, nowhere near. And I don't think it ever was or could be like that. This isn't me avoiding anything. I think it's more like a surrender, or maybe patience. Clean will earn its way home ultimately, while I go on lurching inch to inch somewhere I'm supposed to be again.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. That's the first time I've read that one out loud.
Well, that's a debut on our podcast, my podcast there. Mm-hmm. So this took you several years. Is that what you said, or is this a different?
Yeah, the raw actual creation part of it before it became the craft part of it where you're editing and moving and all that kind of stuff. That was about 2 years just sitting down in a notebook and just writing day in day out every single time I felt anything. And then after those 2 years, that's when the editorial process began, where I worked with my wife, and then I got tons and tons of feedback from amazing people out there, some harsh feedback, some great feedback. I just kept whittling it down and rewriting. It's seen, I'd say this book has probably seen 20 different iterations. And this is my favorite iteration of it, even though, oh boy, did I have to cut a lot of darlings and kill a lot of darlings. When you get to that point, you're not cutting the bad stuff anymore. You're actually cutting the good stuff, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, I think we're all different, and getting rid of things, or when we have to excise, get rid of, cut things that we like or love. I guess a darling is in the love category, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
There were definitely some loves that I had to let go.
That's hard. I mean, that's you don't have to. Yeah, that's a thing. You've mentioned more than once the influence of a particular person, Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
Even one of your poems in this volume is done to the Leonard Cohen piece of music. Do you want to first talk about when you first discovered Cohen's work, when that was, and also anything you might want to say about it?
Leonard Cohen, one of my favorite, there's two quotes of his that I find really appropriate for this. So the first one is that grief makes us precise. That's one of my favorite quotes from him. And then the other one is talking about the, I'm paraphrasing, it's the power of a thought that is in flames, right? And talking about the need to explore a thought that is in flames. And so for me, when I first met his work, I remember I was pretty young. I can't remember how young I was now. I was born in '83, and I don't know when he released the music video for Closing Time. But I remember sitting on the floor. It's Much Music, MTV era, and the music video for Closing Time comes on, and I'm hearing this guy like growl talk his way through a song, but at the same time, I'm starting to listen to the lyrics. It's the first time like lyrics have hit me, and then I remember just being profoundly like he's doing things with words that I've never seen before, and it shouldn't be this deep. Like, they're very simple words, but something about them, something the way they hang together, something about the way that the rhyme is so smooth that it's almost hidden. It doesn't feel like whimsical poetry. Instead, it feels like something real and something really effective. And then my parents had on the shelf a collection of his poetry. I think at the time, I can't remember which collection it was, but I remember his was the first book of poetry that I had opened and realized like, oh, almost everything in here is rhyming, almost everything. And then like just the musicality of it and the feeling of it and all of that. There's also something about Leonard Cohen's attention to meter and attention to like every single syllable is there for a reason.
Oh yeah.
And because of that, the rhyming thing almost feels like just a wonderful after effect rather than, he meant to step out and write lyrics sort of thing, right? Instead, he's just, this is the way he writes. Oh, and by the way, it rhymes beautifully, right? And so something about the musicality of that has always appealed to me. And one of the things I talk about a lot is everything I write, whether it's free verse or whether it's fiction or whether it's rhyming verse, always has music behind it. Always in the back of my head, there's like, everything moves and has rhythm and flow, and it's directly because of his work. And I feel like that man was constantly grazing on the outskirts of something fundamental whenever he was writing, and that got me. That always got me.
I mean, for me, the first time was we're different generations. I was born in '67, so I'm 57. So for me, it was a movie, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Robert Altman. Do you know this movie?
I know Robert Altman very well, and this movie, yes. Yeah,
well, that's an introduction to Cohen. I mean,
yeah,
and that is it. I mean, as a child, similar. Is there anything else you want to? I'm sorry, you're going to say something just now.
I was just going to ask you from a musician standpoint on the side of being introduced to Leonard Cohen. I'm not a musician myself, right? My instrument is singing, not any sort of actual musical instrument. But for Leonard Cohen, for you, do you see his poetry translate to the music as well?
I don't quite understand your question.
Do you feel like it's a marriage of the two, of like his lyricism and his poetry and the music itself?
Well, that's a tough question. So it's in terms of, you mean him as a composer? Yeah. So I would say that he's one of the good guys and good people. Good people, because actually, so I'm going to be very blunt with you.
Yeah.
A lot of people in rock and pop and folk, those three categories, a lot of people in those three categories are not very good musicians. I mean, I can name people that are beloved. I would be shocked. You're saying no. The tendency is in those three fields for the poetry to be strong.
Yes.
But the music to be subpar, but people don't care about that, and they think the song is great because the lyric. That's kind of what I think. And so I'm going to be very bold and say Leonard Cohen, almost like a Joni Mitchell, like a Bob Dylan, like a Randy Newman. Those three are personal favorites. Leonard Cohen is a fine composer.
Really? That's amazing.
So, why you surprised at that, or?
Yeah. You just taught me something. Because I see a lot of really good musicians do really good things with a Leonard Cohen song, right? Like even even like some of Johnny Cash's covers of Leonard Cohen song are like stunning and almost do that thing. I mean, Johnny Cash has a way of doing that where he like makes the song almost his own, where you don't even realize it's a cover. So it's like, but yeah, anyway, it's just that's really cool. I learned something today. So.
Well, it's the way he performs his music, the way he performs the song. So when he performs Cohen, so he has a whole thing of performance in his groups, and so I'm very impressed with that. And so when I see that, like, that person's delivering something.
That's a good way to put it. It's delivering something.
And so he's a performer, and he's a beautiful performer. And so for me, I can't separate out him as a singer, songwriter, performer. Singer, songwriter, performer. That's not always the case. I mean, there's a lot of cats, that they. I sort of think the lyric, as I said, the lyric might be great, but the music is not as good. Well, again, as a musician, I'm sensitive to that, and so I have to put aside my criticism when I'm talking to other people. People say, "Mitch, isn't this so fantastic?" Like, well, yes, the lyrics are good, but they should take more music lessons on the melodies. This is, by the way, that's pervasive in popular music. That's pervasive. So many times in popular music, there's an inequality between word and music.
Yeah,
and I think it could just be that these are people that are just trying to get a message out there, or the poetry is their first love.
Yeah.
And then there are people like Joni. So Joni Mitchell's a case where somebody is really self-taught.
Yeah.
And she's Canadian, right? Joni Mitchell, I think.
Yeah.
Well, Joni Mitchell is one of those people who's really a really top-notch composer, even though she's not musically trained at all. But Court and Spark and all of her work is such a high level musically. It just blows me away. But that's rare. That's rare. I hear that. Wow, that's unusual.
Yeah,
unusual. So that's I'm happy with. So Leonard, you were surprised that I put Leonard Cohen in that category. I do.
Yeah. I just don't know enough musically to know, like, is he a good musician, or is he like an incredible performer, as you say, right? And so it's cool to learn that.
I would say both. So he was able to create his own. So sometimes people create their own thing. They create their own thing, so that question doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's that too. Or there's somebody who so there are people who have a terrible singing voice, really terrible. Well, Bob Dylan comes to mind immediately. I mean, this is a matter of, Bob Dylan. I mean, Dylanologists don't want me to say that, but they're going to have to own out. He's not. He was so Dylan. You could put it this way: that Dylan's genius is the fact he's able to overcome such a bad singing voice. Much of the population don't think he has a bad singing voice. They think he's okay, but that's I don't know. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Maybe style plays a role. Like when you were writing science fiction, you said that everybody wanted to do. How important to you were the rules of science fiction, if there were rules when you wrote that?
There's very important to me. So I come from the hard sci-fi side of things, where yeah, exactly. Like it has to make, at the very least, theoretical scientific sense, right? Even if it's wild, woolly, and weird, right? It's still like, is it grounded in at least something that we think might be possible? Like, that's where I come from on that side. And then in the writing side, like, there are so many science fiction tropes that if you don't at least nod at them or wink at them, like a sci-fi fan is going to be like, this guy sucks. You know what I mean? So like, if you don't at least, pay homage a little bit to the tropes of science fiction, then yeah, definitely. And I love them, right? Like I love what it gives us, right? So yeah, for me, the rules were fairly important to, those are the stories that move me, is when we're in a sci-fi space.
Do you mind listing some of those? Well, there's two sets of rules. So there's rules that apply the sci-fi world, and I'm not a sci-fi person at all. Probably a much more sci-fi person than myself, I'm guessing. What are some of those rules that you have to deliver? Almost like, what comes to mind, or what would?
Yeah, like the most important, like for instance, okay, so if you're doing what I would call like a fly-by-night sci-fi, right? Where there are no real, like, it doesn't matter how we got here in this world.
Okay.
We're just here now and away we go, right?
Okay.
And versus a hard sci-fi where it's like, no, like it's everything is in how you build the world and how that world is built on an underlying foundation of at least some scientific theory or thought, right? So it would be like the most prevalent difference, or the most known way to define that is like Star Trek is closer to hard sci-fi. Like, don't get me wrong, like they don't follow like all of the rules, but it's closer to hard sci-fi. Star Wars is fantasy in space, right? It's sword and sorcery and that kind of thing in space, right? So yeah, like that's I guess the better way to put it is this: if I could drill it down into one thing, is the possibility of what you're doing in the sci-fi space is, for me, far more important than just like the story you tell in a sci-fi backdrop, right? And one of the other big ones too is the whole point of sci-fi is not just to be like, cool world, it's a cool world. It's putting normal people in extraordinary circumstances and seeing how those people live and react within it, right? Like that to me is the most interesting thing. It's again studying humanity. So
well, that's true, but I mean, I'm thinking more about your father again, of course, because he was a scientist, right?
Consummate scientist, yeah. So
well, let me ask you this follow-up question to that, and maybe it's too big a question. What do you think the relationship is between art and science today in 2025, or what are the relationships, or how does your family's natural science, if that's what it is, natural science background, inform your artistic creativity? I know that's a big, I'm sure things.
So this is really interesting because like my father on his side, he so when he went through university, he was a mechanical engineer and draftsman, and then later in life, basically agricultural scientist. He's like, I'm going to start a ranch and I'm going to do this the best way possible, right? So whereas my mom comes from a very religious background, Catholicism, and she, like, she went to university for law and that kind of stuff, and then she ended up being a teacher and that kind of thing. But there was definitely there's kind of conflict between those two sides of things. And but I don't think, I'm going to be real, I don't think that conflict is worthwhile at all. I think, in fact, that art and science are like mutually beneficial. And in fact, I would say that an art absent at least a scientific approach to the art itself is bereft of something. I think it's empty of something if you do that, right? So,
well, I'll go even further. Actually, that old, now it's going to continue because it's a debate over, I guess, issues of theism and belief.
Yeah.
But that debate between the religious folks, like your mother's side, and the hardcore natural scientists, that's a bogus debate that I see as a side effect of political history.
I would agree.
Only political history. So it's just a weird result of just these awful, you would agree with that, right? It's kind of like, it's a debate that's thrown into our laps.
Yeah, like there are wonderful examples too. Like even today, so like you think about something like astrophysics or cosmology, it seems so far removed from like the regular, like two people in a room talking, and yet some of the best writers, some of the most poetic and beautiful writers right now out there are astrophysicists. Like Carlo Rovelli writes like a dream. Adam Frank, the book Light of Our Stars, I highly recommend everybody go out and read that book. Like, these are extraordinary, like sometimes funny and beautiful and poetic writers. And why? It's because when you're studying, astrophysics, you're studying the origins of the universe, you have no choice but to come toe to toe with what it means to be human, right? Yep. Like, no choice. So that's why I honestly think you can't be one without the other. I think artists are scientists, and I think scientists are in their own way artists as well. So yeah. This is
again, I mentioned this because I was happy to hear about your two parents, the mom and the dad, and the religion of science. That they can come together, however fractious this coming together can be, or a lot of it could be what a person's proposing. Like a person, I might say, well, you must think such and such, or this is the case, or this is the, into discussion. I say, Miguel, is there anything else you want to say, either on poetry, on fiction, or genre, that as we come towards a conclusion of a sort? Or?
The only thing I want to say is, whether you read the book or not, I want anybody who encounters grief, I want to encourage them to not shy away from it. I've seen a lot of people go numb when the time comes and not explore it. And I want everybody to know that there are profound gifts for you if you sit with it, you move through it, you consult it, you and that includes everything. Like get pissed off at it, whatever it is. Like, just, I encourage everybody to do it in their own way, whatever that way is. And because I remember, this is the last thing. It was about, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. So it was like a couple years after Dad died, 2 or 3 years after Dad died. And I'm sitting on the living room floor, and I remember, like, I have my son and my daughter with me, and we were playing something, and then all of a sudden I started to cry. Something activated me, and I started to cry, and I was thinking about my father. And when I knew I was okay, when I knew I was through it all, and I got all of its gifts, was when I was crying, and I smiled at my wife, and I said, what a profound gift. What a profound gift it is to love something so much that it hurts this bad when they're gone. And that moment I want for everybody. Like, I want everybody to feel that, because it is it's changing. It really is. Like, it shifts you entirely. And so that's the only thing I want to say about that.
Well, that's I can't think of a better way to end this or any episode on my show. That I want to sit with that for a while. That's wow. Well, thank you, Miguel. Thanks for this this volume of poetry and those words. And yes, I want to thank you. I thank you above all for your generosity of time and generosity of spirit, and dare say even wisdom. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the even just to sit here and chat about it is, like I said, it's awesome. So much appreciated.
Thank you.